Hello, and welcome to the Wade Borth podcast. I'm your host, Wade Borth, and in every episode, my goal is to get you to think differently about how money works and ultimately to empower you to take control of your money and your personal financing system. Well, I think that's true in every business, probably is true maybe in your businesses, even in my industry as well, because everybody thinks Dave Ramsey has the answers to all their problems, or Susie Orman, or somebody has the answers to all their problems. In all reality, the answers to your problems lie within you. And then you have, and part of that means, okay, I have to realize what I'm good at and realize what I'm not good at. Understanding what my hourly worth is, for lack of a better word, versus what's this really costing me. Because I think people, and this goes back into a lot of the IBC stuff we talk about. If people don't understand, again, if I have $10,000 in cash and I put it and I buy something with it, that cash, the use of that cash has a value. It has an expense. Even though we don't want to recognize it, we're going to say, hey, it didn't cost me anything because I used my own cash. What if you could have taken that cash and got 8% on it, or 10% or 20% on it? Then it really has a cost. And it's the same thing with every business, right? If you're taking, again, I go back to what you said, and I think it's important to hammer home. If you're taking $200 an hour expertise and working on a project where you could pay somebody, $50 an hour or whatever the hourly rate is, that just doesn't make any sense. And like you said, unless you really have a passion to do it. Yeah. And then if you really have that passion to do it, then you have to ask yourself, well, then why am I doing what I'm doing? Is it just for the money? And if you want to turn it around and say, I have a passion to do marketing or website development or whatever it is, find a way to make that your business, because life is too short to do things that you don't enjoy. Yep. And that goes back to a whole conversation about retirement, right? So people are just in a hurry to retire. And I said, the only reason people are in a hurry to retire is because they hate what they do.
And just to throw a little bit of, just to think about this, because we've talked about this many times. If you're, just for good math, if you think you're worth $100 an hour, and in business, as a business owner, whatever it is, honestly, Wade, have you ever been ahead of the game in your business? Are you always, and to some degree, when you're growing business, you're always hours behind. You're always trying to catch up. You're always trying to figure out the next thing. So like, you're probably always sitting on and again, just for good math, you're probably always sitting on a backlog of 20 hours behind. Man, if there were just more days in a week, if there were just more hours in a day, and you tell yourself this, and it's, again, completely normal, but that's the reality of owning a business. Now, what if you could put a few more hours in your day by not building that website yourself, or not doing that? If you start to look at those $10 an hour tasks versus those $100 an hour tasks, all of a sudden you're going to chisel away at those 20 hours that are always hanging over your head at a higher rate of return. And all of a sudden, wow, that wasn't so hard. Plus, I made enough money to offset the cost of the stuff I outsourced. That was way easier. Yeah, but allow yourself the freedom to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole point, is we have a tendency to want to take this finite thing called time that we have on this earth and trade it for this infinite thing we call money. And I'm going to say infinite because I'm a true believer that whatever the amount that you want on this earth, how much you want to earn and make, and that's all within us, all, right? We all have the ability to do that. Sometimes we just haven't been empowered to do those things. We haven't been inspired to do it, or whatever it is, but you do have a finite amount of time. And so why are we trading this finite item that we have for this infinite thing called money? It just seems silly, right? So if we could free ourselves from doing these tasks, and again, I don't think any of us are perfect at doing this, but we just have to strive to get better at doing it. And again, I look at myself, there's a lot of tasks that I used to do. Now I would just hire people and say, okay, I'm just going to go out and use my expertise that I'm really good at that can earn me a lot higher hourly rate, and I'm going to hire somebody else to do it. And it frees up this time. And then what it does, it gives you the things to grow maybe a relationship. It grows maybe more time with your spouse, your kid, maybe just yourself, even to grow spiritually or grow yourself. If you exchange that $10 an hour, that again, maybe in today's world, it's $20 an hour or $30 an hour, whatever it is, those tasks that you can pay somebody $30 an hour to do, to give you that time back to do these other things, that's true freedom to me. Yep. And that's really what we strive to teach people. Don't try to be all things to yourself. Find what you're good at, find what your passion is, enjoy doing that part of it, and then find other people that enjoy doing the other parts that you don't like, and then it's a great marriage and great relationship. And this goes back to exactly how our relationship started too, Mike, is I don't like marketing. I don't like all the stuff that you do because you do it so well. I'd rather turn it over to you. and then let me go do what I'm good at, what my passion tells me to do. And that's working with people and individuals and defining how they can take control of the banking function in their lives and how they can find the freedom that they want when it comes to these financial issues, right? So that's my passion. That's your passion. We married together, and we've had a great relationship moving forward.
Yeah. And I would even say, just as a clean disclaimer moment, I fully believe what we're talking about. And I believe I will completely back up anything I have said in this podcast, but I am just as guilty of it as anybody else. I get behind the 8 ball. I put things on the back burner. I think, I'm going to get to that. And all of a sudden, somewhere in that process, I'm like, okay, I could have had that done 3 weeks ago if I'd have just hired somebody.
Yeah.
So I'm as guilty as anybody, but I'm always watching for that stuff because it's a make or break scenario for growth. It really is, because you can be your own bottleneck and you can be your own worst enemy in some of those cases. So you got to just get out of your own way.
And I think we all do that. I'm not saying we all have to be perfect. I think it's just degrees of what we allow ourselves to get into. I think, and part of it is just recognition, is that first thing you have to do is like, okay, there is a better way to do this, or putting value on your time. What is and again, I use hourly rate, and sometimes people don't like to associate money with time, but I think it's just a good way to measure, because all money is just a measure of value that somebody provided. And so if you put them together, you're going to say, oh, okay, I see what my hourly rate is, as it were, and we can find somebody else to do the other stuff, because again, it's just to a degree, because if we all do it, we're all going to always do it. I don't think we're going to ever get completely away from it. But first thing is recognizing that, hey, there is a way to differentiate between things I love, things I hate, what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, what I'm spending my money on, and what's making me money. And so all those things we have to take a look at. And again, this is from a business owner perspective, like you and I are in, or even an individual. What are you willing to do? What do you will? If you love to go out and fish or golf, but you live on a 3-acre lot out and you have 3 acres of grass to mow, isn't it worth paying somebody if you want to go out and golf? I have clients that do that all the time. They have this small little lot. Somebody come in and mow their lawn. I'm looking like, man, I can mow that thing in about 10 minutes. But he doesn't want to take the time to do it, trim, make it look professional, because he wants to be on the golf course enjoying that grass versus doing the mowing himself. And that's just really what we're talking about. So
Yep. No, I'd agree with that. And I think it's hard for people to think that way. And again, there's a time where you shut it off and turn it on. But I think if you can take what you make annually, break it down by how many hours you believe you work per year, figure out what you believe your hourly rate is. When you're in business mode, you should be keeping track of what your time is worth. And that's everything from a happy hour to meetings. If you're somebody who sits in way too many meetings, you got to look at that hourly rate and think, okay, how much money am I blowing on meetings? And are those meetings necessary? Because at this point, if I'm spending X amount to sit in meetings, I better be getting something out of it, or it better be moving the ball forward for my business. Otherwise, I got to rethink how many meetings I'm having.
Yeah. There's a gentleman by the name of John Maxwell. I don't know if you've listened to him.
Oh yeah,
Mike. I've listened to him, and that's actually one thing that he'd mentioned that I heard too. And I love this idea. He goes, before they sit down with the meeting, they'll say, hey, this meeting is costing us $2,500 an hour. Are we going to get $2,500 worth of value out of this meeting?
Yep.
I'm like, it's so simple, but it's genius, right? Understanding what it's costing you to have that 1 hour sit down. And if you're not getting that kind of value, why is that meeting being held? But we can take that individually as well, or in our small business. And when I say small business, we might have 1 or 2 or 3 employees. It doesn't have to be at a corporate level that we take these ideas and these thoughts and put them to work, because it's always at the individual level.
Yep. The only caveat I would throw at that is, as the visionary, or as the person who's the visionary for a brand or a company, you have to be able to see past the numbers sometimes and see if there's intrinsic value that could develop, is developing, those kinds of things, because it's good to keep track of it, but it's also, you never know where some of these conversations might lead. And that's a very kind of a fun part of what we do from building a brand and kind of being open-minded and thinking outside the box, is one connection, one conversation could lead to 10 more. You just don't know it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good point. We need to clarify that it's not always about the dollars and cents, but I think you need to recognize that, hey, this means it costs $2,500. Yeah, but I find way more value in that, in the sense that by having our conversation we had 3 weeks ago, and we were talking about how there's these 5 degrees of, if you went and met me and you went and met somebody else and so on and so forth, you wouldn't be in this position. That's completely agreeable. But sometimes I know I'm going to spend the money. I'm not sure what the value is going to be in the back end, but I find a tremendous amount of value. So it's not always about the dollars. It's just recognizing that there is a cost to doing everything we do.
Yeah.
And
it's just a right brain, left brain thing where you have one foot in the practical and the dollars and cents, and you're trying to do the math and be smart. But at the same time, you're always keeping that door open on the right side of the brain to say, what's fun? Where are the opportunities? What could come from this? When does the money not matter? When is my time worth it? So you're always playing both sides, and it's important to pay attention to both sides, because otherwise, if you're too practical, you fall in the rut. If you're too creative, you're not paying attention to the dollars and cents. So you have to live in two worlds sometimes.
Yeah. And that goes back to, I know in Nelson Nash's book, he talked about what we do as an exercise in imagination, logic, reason, and prophecy. So how does it, sometimes imagination, you don't get a return on that immediately, right?
Yeah.
Just imagining if we could sit there and today and you and I would sit and brainstorm for an hour over lunch about the what if, right? What if we could 10 times our business next year? Okay, did we get an immediate return off that? No. But next year, if we have 10 times the size of our business as either one of us or all our clients, then it was well worth it. So it was pennies on the dollar that we got out of what we did. So you have to have those times where you have those visionary thought processes. You have to have the time where you can say, logically, it says this, but I'm going to ignore that right now because I have a bigger vision that I want to work with. And I think that's what's helpful about having a good group of people around, at least around me, is like that the visionary parts of all this have a tendency to come out when we start throwing ideas out there and bringing everybody, well, what if we do this? Or Mike, you're great at that. It's like, what if we do this? Or what if we do this? Knowing who I am, when you start throwing those ideas out, maybe they're outside of my comfort zone. They're outside of what I like to do, but I'm willing to listen because I've worked with you and I trust you to say, here's my professional telling me this is what we should do. I don't like the idea, but I'm willing to listen to it. And then after I listen to it, I'm like, I like that idea, or I like parts of that idea. So it seems like it's never 100% one way or the other, but the idea that you're willing and open to listen and learn is probably a trait that very successful people have, that I would say that people that aren't real successful don't have that ability to say, I don't know this area, so I'm going to engage with Mike and I'm going to listen to an idea that I think is completely crazy, but I'm willing to engage with this idea because I want to learn. I want to expand what my thought process is. And I think if you can do that, again, there has to be a balance there, but if you can do that, then your vision or your horizon is limitless.
Yeah. I learned early on in my career, and again, I've always thought a little differently anyway, but like I learned early on in my career that most people are comfortable with expected results.
Yep.
Why do you want limited and expected results? Why don't you want unexpected results? Yep. Most people will take the definition of unexpected results and think, well, I don't want any bad results. I didn't say bad results. I said unexpected results. So if your unexpected result turns into a 10x growth next year, that's a pretty good deal.
Right.
But if you live in the expected world, and if you only check the boxes they give you to check, and if you think inside your bubble, that 10x ain't happening. So you have to sometimes think outside the box. And again, you got to be smart. You got to be practical. You got to pay attention so you make bad things happen. But you got to look for unexpected results sometimes. And sometimes that means you can't necessarily quantify what the next step is. So as you were talking about your comfort zone, part of my job and part of what I just like to do anyway, I never want to start the conversation where Wade's comfortable or where a client's comfortable, because that's pretty limiting. Let's start at the end of the story where if Wade wants to run a marathon next year or race cars or whatever it is he thinks he wants to do, let's start with that and then figure out how we're going to get there. And right. Even if we fail, we're going to get a lot further down that road towards that goal than we ever would have if we stayed in the comfortable place Wade or any client is used to.
100%. And I would agree that you do that quite often, right? So we start with that premise of let's go here. Again, sometimes that just because of some of the ingrained conditioned thinking I've been part of with the marketing world, I'm not comfortable with that. But you take us there and it's like, even if we don't go 100% there, man, we're so much further on down the road. But it's the same thing with my business. I think when you deal with any professional, if they know what they're doing, they take you there. So how many times did I talk to you about this idea of imagining never being indebted to the bank ever again. That is so uncomfortable to people. It's just it's beyond their imagination to most people that it makes them really uncomfortable. But once we start with that premise that you don't have to be enslaved to the banking institutions, and they're going to say, well, tell me more. Those people that want to know more are those that are going to move forward. Now, do they get 100% there? Maybe, maybe not, but they're a whole lot better off after they met me than before they met me. And that's really the intent.
Because the pushback on some of that stuff, and I ask this, I can't even tell you how many times I ask this of people per week. I always ask the question, why? When somebody says, why, I can't do that. Well, why not? Well, I want to grow my business 10x this year, but I don't know if that's possible. Why not? Why not? But it says, you have no, I'm not saying it wouldn't be difficult. I'm not saying it wouldn't be torture. I want to run a marathon a day for a year. Okay, that'd be torture, but why not? Like, you can actually, almost every scenario, you can break it down to a path that puts you on that logical process of how to get there. William Shatner flew to the space. Do you think anybody saw that coming? I doubt it. But somebody said, yeah, why not? Let's throw Captain Kirk in a missile and launch him into space. They did it. And anybody can do that. You can start your own business. You can build your own brand. You can grow 10x. You can do all these things. But again, is it going to happen in a year? Is it going to happen the way you planned it? Is it going to be easy? No, none of those things are going to be easy. But
I hope it doesn't happen as a plan. That's the big thing. So just going back to that whole idea, maybe it isn't that difficult. If we do it the way it was done yesterday, it probably is going to be difficult.
Yep.
But what if there's a way to do it, maybe that we haven't thought of yet, that we could 10x our business without working 10 times harder? If we could work half the amount of time and 10 times our business. I mean, just think about that for perspectives. Like, I could work half the amount of time out. Is it possible? Maybe it is. I don't know. But you have to be open to that thought process that, hey, I could do all the things I want to do and work half the amount of hours and take all that extra free time and spend it with my family. But if you think, well, I'm going to 10x my business, I got to work 10 times as hard, it's never going to happen.
No, and that's the part people have to realize, is that those big jumps, those big steps, those big goals, again, not that they're going to be easy, but they don't necessarily
have to be hard.
They don't have to be hard, and they don't have to quantify at the level of growth that you like. Do you have to work 10 times as hard to grow your business 10x? No, you might have to work 1.5% harder, or there might be an equation there where you got to do something a little different, or maybe not at all, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a 1-to-1. Like, if you look at look at John Maxwell, Richard Branson, Steve Jobs, if you look at some of these people who have changed the world in the last 25, 30 years, they all did it by being unique and by looking towards the unexpected and by not doing it like everybody else. The everybody else pool, and again, God bless those people, they're probably doing okay too, but we don't know who those people are. We don't know their names because they did it like everybody else. And the guys who stand out are the guys who do different. Those are the ones that the word travels. When, again, I'm a work in progress, but the best compliment I ever get from clients or potential clients, prospects, is when they say, yeah, I heard about you from Wade and he said this. And when they come to me kind of telling me, we're here to talk to you because we know you're different, that's the best compliment I can have. If they were to come to me and say, we're talking to you because we heard you got great analytics, your numbers trend, like, that's I don't know what that means. Like, to be somebody that's known for taking chances and doing the unexpected, that's what you want, because that excites people. That's what makes people buy in. And whether it's IBC or marketing or whatever, you got to have belief. Belief is huge in success and business and taking chances. And if you don't believe, it's not necessarily going to happen.
Yeah. And the belief starts with yourself. That's where I'm a key believer in. It's about the empowerment, not the control of people. So empower them to believe that they can do it. Because again, Mike, when it comes down to it, you're not telling me anything I have to do. You're saying, here's some suggestions, here's ideas. You're empowering me to make a great informed decision. And that's what I love. And then if it doesn't work out, well, okay, that's fine. Let's go try something else. Where a lot of people, I think, in the financial world, really any parts of this world, is they want somebody else to take that control from them and do for them.
I'll throw one more thing on there, that The IBC practitioners specifically that I work with, I remind them all and help them understand that they're also risk takers by asking for something different. They don't necessarily even know what they're asking for, but the fact that they're asking means that they've just stepped outside the rut of what everybody else is doing. And then what we do from there, who knows? But it's important that the client knows that too. Like I've told you that before, where you got to stop and give yourself a little bit of credit for being unique and being a pioneer in the space, because you're one of less than 10% who are doing it differently. Like when they come to me, when IBC practitioners come to me and we do the research on here's what everybody else is doing, that's not what we're doing. That's not what Sagewell Strategy is doing. That's not what I'm doing with other IBC practitioners. And that's not the plans that we build at Cyberdogz. So like, it's fun to help them realize that they're rebels too.
Yeah. I would agree. I've told a lot of my colleagues in the sense that if you want to get your message out, work with somebody that's not going to work with the other. You say 10%, I'm going to say that's probably pretty generous, but doesn't want to do the same thing that the rest of the 90% of the population is doing in this industry. Find somebody that's willing to go outside and approach it a little bit differently. So I've referred a lot of my brethren in this industry back to you because of the fact that that's who you are. It's like, and again, I take a lot of things from the traditional financial world and I still apply those things. It's not like those aren't important. But what we do is, again, when a client comes to me, the biggest thing that they can do, the biggest trait that they can have is to be open-minded, to think, be able to think from themselves. That's all I ask. I don't ask them to do anything else, to be anybody else besides that, just the ability to be open-minded and to accept a possibility that what you've been taught. A good friend of mine used to say, Don Blanton used to say, if what you thought to be true turned out not to be, when would you want to know it? And those people that are saying, maybe what I've been taught is not 100% correct. There's some truth to it. There's some truth to everything that's been told in this world. But if the majority of what you're being told isn't correct, when would you want to know it? And I think that's the real key is, are we able to accept the possibility that what we've been told isn't 100% true? If we're able to accept that, then I find that those are the people that we have a great working relationship with. If you're enjoying this podcast or know anyone else that might be interested, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and please leave a review. This will help this podcast reach and help more people by ranking higher in searches and ultimately help more people get out of financial bondage. And don't be afraid to share this podcast with your friends and family, as we can be easily found on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.